Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session of Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this morning, we shall be posing the question, is Canada or has Canada set up a military base in Jamaica? Is Jamaica the military base or the military hub, right, of Canadian forces, Canadian military forces? This is a very interesting question and something that we need to dive into and something that you also need to spend some time researching, because one of the things that is happening in our world is that people do not often know how to do research. They do not know what to research about because they are controlled by the mainstream media. So whatever the mainstream media tells them is important, that is what they do their research, and they go down a rabbit hole and nothing comes of it, and then the next big event comes on, but there is no continuity of what is happening, and people are therefore in the dark. And I think that most Jamaicans would be in the dark as far as a military base or a Canadian military hub in Jamaica is concerned. Because when you think about Canada, you don't think about military bases, certainly. You think, that they have their military forces, but, I don't think that people ever even imagine that the Canadians would be setting up military bases in other countries, right? You think mainly of the United States as the reigning military empire, the reigning sole superpower of the world. That is the only country that you think about. But let's get into the weeds of the matter. Now, this morning, let's open up with the Gleaner, right? The Gleaner. And let me share my screen with you that you can see, because you don't want to tell me now that you are just dispensing conspiracy theories, as you like to say, right? Because that is how you have been indoctrinated and your mind operates. So I can't really think better of what you will say or will not say. Now, the fact of the matter is, the Gleaner reported, and this is from March 31st, 2024. No, this is not the one that I'm talking about. Let's go back here. Right. So yeah. So we have this was published on June 5th, 2011. And this was after the Dudley's operation, right? The Christopher Dudley's incursion, the Tivoli Gardens incursion, I should say. And after he would have been extradited to the United States on gun running and drug running, because he was this great and gigantic, right, drug kingpin, and he had to be dealt with. And we know the events of that particular incident in Jamaica. Now, the Gleaner reported on June 5th, 2011, so that's a long time ago. Jamaica is reportedly one of several countries in which Canada is seeking to set up a base to better position its military to participate in international missions. A report in Montreal's newspaper, Le Devoir, stated that the Canadian forces was negotiating to set up bases under a program known as the Operational Support Hubs Network. Right, so that is the network under which they are working. It is reported that they have already completed negotiations with Germany and Jamaica and are in talks with Kuwait, Senegal, Kenya or Tanzania, Singapore, and South Korea. So these are the countries also that they are trying to set up military bases in. So have they been successful? That is the question. Now, let us look at another paper, right? And this is Legion. That's the paper that from which this article is written or is published, or in which I should say the article is published. So we have here Beyond Top Secret, undercover with Canadian Special Operations Forces in Jamaica, right? In Jamaica. Now we see them here, and they seem to be having their military training in Jamaica. Now, they don't, much like the James Bond characterization, these undercover Canadian soldiers, in fact, they reject it. But then you kind of expect that they would, if they were the kind of people to reveal in the drama of covert operations. Well, they probably wouldn't be in the Canadian Special Operations Regiment, discreetly employed to Jamaica to help train a special operations unit of the Jamaica Defense Force. Regardless, the cloak and dagger aspect can't be ignored. The plain synopsis of what they do sounds like it's lifted straight from a Hollywood script, right? So this is a secretive operation. And it went on to say that many people do not even know that they are Canadians who are training on Jamaican soil, what they're about, because sometimes they do operate as if they're civilians. Well, or they are just visitors on the island. And that is what. So this is a secretive plot that many of Jamaican citizens are not aware of. Now, so that is something that you can read on your own. I will leave the description. I will leave this article in the description box, right? Now, so we have here, I think we read this already. I think NACLA's had a very good, NACLA, not NACLA's, but NACLA, or NACLA, has a very good article on the whole issue of the Canadian militarization of the Caribbean, particularly Jamaica. And Jamaica is to be the hub, right? Because we are the hub of everything. Everything that is negative, we are the hub. We and Haiti are always, we're always in the media, right, about negative things because we're essentially neo-colonies, right? We are essentially neo-colonies. What is happening in Haiti will have an impact in Jamaica and vice versa. And, there are articles which I have read, and I'm sure some of the information is included rather in the articles that I'm reading to you, which suggests that after the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, right, that is when the Canadians thought that that would have been a key time and an opportune time to have gone to Jamaica to set up a military base because they are they are planning ahead in the case of another catastrophic climate change, natural disaster or whatever you want to call it. They would be able to be prepared to deal with that, right? But you can ask yourself the question, was the Haitian earthquake dealt with it in a very effective manner? Did they really help the Haitian people? That question you will have to answer for yourselves, right? Now, we have to look at this article, and it's coming from NACLA, as I said. Canada, a late but eager partner in policing the Caribbean, right? So Canada is also policing the Caribbean. Canada is also policing the Caribbean, and something that you have to understand. And, in the Dominican Republic, they have what you call Barry Gold, where they're mining for gold, right? And you really wonder what they're doing. Right? They're mining for gold. I'm not sure if they also have an entity in Haiti, but I know of a fact that they do have a company here, Barry Gold, that is mining gold in sections of the Dominican Republic, something that you have to be aware of. Now, Canadian forces have participated in numerous counter-narcotics missions in the Caribbean Basin as part of the wider U.S. Joint Interagency Task Force South. So we now know that the Canadians work collaboratively with their North American counterparts, something that you need to understand. There's nothing that the U.S. military does that, or any military imperial undertakings, done by the United States that in which Canada, the Canadians do not participate. They always participate. They work conjointly with the United States, right? The missions, in combination with the opening of a Canadian military base in Jamaica, raise serious questions about the wider militarization of Canadian relations with the Caribbean. And this was written by Kevin Edmonds. And I think that Kevin Edmonds is Caribbean, could be Jamaican, but I think, and he studied at the University of Toronto. I did read some of other information about him, and I think one of these days I'd like to invite him on this show so that he could elaborate more on that occurrence, on what happened there and what is happening at present, and how that or this militarization is going to impact the Caribbean region. Right? Something I'm looking forward to. I have not yet invited him, but I hope to invite him to the show. He has based on what I've read about him and his thoughts, right? I think that he should have some interesting perspectives to share on this show. Now, since 2006, Canadian forces have participated in numerous counter-narcotics missions in the Caribbean basin called Operation Caribe, or Caribe, as part of the wider U.S. Joint Interagency Task Force South. So we learned about that. You can read up on this, the Joint Interagency Task Force South. Arguably, the most visible and perhaps the only example that the Caribbean people have had of their armed forces patrolling international waters in the Caribbean occurred with a recent disclosure on January 16th, and this is now 2012. According to the report, between October and November 2010, the HMCS St. John's Canadian naval ship intercepted a self-propelled semi-submersible or submersible rather submarine filled with 6,700 kilograms of cocaine with a street value of $180 million. So we see them here, and this is their base, and we can see the Jamaican flag, and here we also see the Canadian flag, right, being hoisted together, right, because they are working collaboratively. Because that is how that's how it's run. That is how the program is set up, and you will have to accept whatever they do, even if they abuse your civil rights. That is how it is set up. Now, historically speaking, Canadian-Jamaican military ties are not new. Canada has maintained an active role in the providing training and equipment to the Jamaican Defense Forces for over 40 years. More recently, special security teams from Guyana and Trinidad have been trained in methods to maintain security and stability at new military facilities located in Moneague, Jamaica. So not only are Jamaican forces trained or being trained, but you also have forces from Guyana and also from Trinidad, right? But the hub is in Jamaica, right? The hub is in Jamaica because that is the country that they have perhaps more control over, right? Because, come and take, we have sold off everything, almost all our assets or valuable or prime assets we have sold out to foreign entities. So how do you think that we would have maintained our freedoms? And for years, I have been saying that if you sell off your primary assets, you are not free. You are not free. And I do not understand for the life of me, but I think history is not properly taught, and people fail to read the history. And as a result of that, they fail to learn the lessons from history. And we are going to learn the lessons very, very the hard way, because I think that perhaps of all the generations that have lived on planet Earth, I think that this generation that we have now, or several generations that are living together, are cohabiting this earth, are the most propagandized generations that this world has ever known. We have access to a lot of information, but the irony is that we do not know half of what we should know. And as a result of that, our leaders are definitely exploiting us, and they do whatever they will, right? Because the people are entertained, and they're doing other things. They're watching football, and they're entertained by what they see on television. So what, I think that they're having a great time with us because we are not very intelligent as we think we are. Now, look at what this is saying. These facilities are the new home of the Caribbean Junior Command and Staff College, which was financed in part by the Canadian government and provides a home for elite training that focuses on the development of Caribbean-centric tactical operations, including jungle warfare, air operations, urban warfare, and internal security operations. Furthermore, the Canadian Military Training and Cooperation Program has also revealed the creation of a counter-terrorism capacity building project in Jamaica, with the goal that it will eventually become a regional special operations force center of excellence for training their Caribbean allies. Right? So Jamaica, again, is the hub. Jamaica is the hub, right? The hub of everything that is negative, because there's nothing positive about this, right? Because this was set up from 2011, some of the articles that I've read from 2009. But certainly the Gleaner reported it in 2011. So let us say that it's been there since 2011, right? For purposes of transparency and the fact that we don't want to go down into a rabbit hole that we don't know where we're going to end. But we do know based on what the Gleaner is suggesting, and the Gleaner hides a lot of things, right? So if it's revealing something, it means that it's happening, right? It's happening. And it's not only coming from the Gleaner, but it's coming from NACA, and it's also coming from other credible sources, something that you need to understand. Now, as a student of international intervention in the Caribbean, it would be naive to assume the opening of a Canadian military base in Jamaica is simply for potential humanitarian purposes and is not connected to anti-narcotics operations or to maintain the wider Canadian economic interests in the Caribbean. Example, Alcon Aluminum Limited in Jamaica, right? So Canadians also want to protect their economic interests because when you look at anything, when you have military operations and military bases are, put or are located in a country, it means therefore that they're there to protect their political and economic interests, right? It's not about saving you and protecting the locals, the citizens of that country. We need to understand that that is not true. And I think that we have lived enough history and we have witnessed enough of their shenanigans to understand that that is not true. But some people still believe in it and they'll die being fools to their graves. A closer examination of history reveals that during the 1970s, the Canadian military presence and training operations in Jamaica were for that exact purpose, right? Learning from the experience in Guyana, when the government of Forbes Burnham nationalized Alcon properties in Guyana in 1971, Canada launched operations Nimrod Caper in Jamaica with the objectives of securing and protecting the Alcon facilities in Jamaica from mob unrest and outright seizure or sabotage, right? So this is how these guys behave, right? This is how these guys behave, like hoodlums, right? And they will do anything to protect their economic interests, right? It's no different from the drug people, the drug kingpins who protect their garrison constituencies, right? And their turf. Absolutely no different. Absolutely no different, and something that you have to look at. And I keep on saying to you that not because somebody's dressed in tie and jacket, and many people are fooled by that and seem to function in formal institutions, it means therefore that that person is clean and is ethical, right? Doesn't mean anything, right? Because if that person if that person is amoral, it means therefore that you are going to see a lot of the, what should I say now, unethical behaviors. And that's what we're seeing here. Looking at the training operations undertaken by the Jamaica Defense Forces, it is relatively safe to assume that counterterrorism, internal security operations, and urban warfare training is very closely related to the increasing influence the drug trade has had on Jamaica and the Caribbean as a whole. And the question is, who controls the drug trade? Something that you have to ask yourselves, who controls this trade, right? And who is the greatest drug kingpin, or who are the greatest drug kingpins? You've got to ask yourselves that question and begin to do your own research about that. Because if you look at what is happening, then many of you are going to be shocked that the people that you're seeing are just the lamb, right, that is slaughtered, right? The sacrificial lambs, I should say, that they have displayed to us. And you think that, okay, after these guys have left the scene, then things are going to be all right, right? You don't have to worry about anything because every little thing is going to be all right. Now, the violent saga to apprehend Christopher Dudus Coke in the summer of 2010 revealed how entrenched drugs and gangs are, not just in the streets, but also in the highest political offices, right? In the highest political offices. They're there. He has made that critical connection. Now, listen to what he's saying here. That is Kevin Edmonds, right? Let's really congratulate him and commend him for writing such a, transparent and illuminating piece. WikiLeaks has added to the analysis by revealing that the United States government has deep fears that Jamaica may be on the verge of falling into the category of a failed state. And we talked about the Fragility Act, the Global Fragility Act. And one of the criteria in which government, the US government can invade a country, can intervene in a country, is if its crime and violence is not controlled. Right? So we know that Jamaica has a problem with crime and violence. We know that its homicide rate is out of whack. And yesterday, somebody challenged me about, wow, I should not have used that, children are brutally massacred in Jamaica, because massacre to her is a word that, it's a word that is over the top, according to her or to him. Not sure if it was a he or it was a she, right? But that person is not living in reality. Right? And we have become desensitized to the level of murder and mayhem that is in Jamaica. People have been desensitized, right? Because it is the norm. It is the air that you breathe down there, and nothing really. It's next, life goes on. Life goes on while thousands are being murdered every day. Well, I shouldn't say every day, but every year, certainly, right? You have this gigantic number of people. I mean, on average, you have over 1,000 people being murdered every year in Jamaica. Every year in a small island nation of that size, right? Round about 3 million people. And the population is not growing. And you wonder why. And nobody's doing any research to find out why has the Jamaican population not grown. The Haitian population has grown significantly. The Dominican population has grown significantly. And the Jamaican population remains stagnant. And no research seems to be coming from our major universities on the island. Nothing. Everybody's mum about that, because that is how the system is designed. Jamaica is an abnormal place, an abnormal society. The shift of Canadian troops into Jamaica may be the first step in a wider effort to protect foreign assets, while much needed development assistance to the Jamaican government is replaced with military cooperation. So they're not about diplomacy anymore. So don't talk about diplomacy. If the US or Canada, right, is not in agreement with Jamaica, they will apply military force, because that is what it is all about. They will apply. You're not living in the era of diplomacy anymore. You are living in the era, you and I are living in the era of militarism. Militarism, right? You don't do what I say, then you face the consequences of military chaos. Okay. Listen to what he continues to say. It is of vital importance to remember that Canada's action in Jamaica are not an anomaly. Let me read it again. It is of vital importance to remember that Canada's actions in Jamaica are not an anomaly. He says Canadian foreign policy in Latin America and the Caribbean has been increasingly focused on security, with an overall militarization of its relationship with the region. The Canadian government's recent funding of controversial Latin American and Caribbean security forces also follows a pattern of increasing security where the economic interests of Canadian firms are very high, right? So that is what it is all about. This is what it's all about. But let us make a little connection here as he's doing, because this is a brilliant piece and he has made the connections. Many times you read articles and people often do not make the connections. He says that Haiti stands out as the most prominent example of this new change towards militarized objectives and tactics, as the Canadian military directly participated in the 2004 coup of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who proposed policies which would be directly at odds with the interests of many Caribbean corporations. After the coup, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police helped to train the Haitian National Police, which was systematically purged of Aristide supporters. A recent analysis has revealed that a concentrated effort was made to staff the new police force with right-wing paramilitaries and former Toton Macoutes. You remember the Toton Macoutes? They were the soldiers of the Baby Doc and Papa Doc, right? And as they rained terror on the Haitian people. And we learned that the troops coming from Kenya are not much better. They are equal. They have that sort of, um, you know, equal status in terms of raining terror. They essentially they are a paramilitary force, right? And that is what they are going to do. Don't save your breath, right? Since the 2010 earthquake, the Canadian government has stated that its priority in Haiti is the funding of security, primarily the training and equipping of police and prisons, right? That's what it's there to do. He's asking a very important question, or some very important questions here that we need to ask ourselves. With the growing influence of the drug trade, that's the question he's asking. Will this lead to more visible forms of intervention in the Caribbean? What impact will this have on Caribbean sovereignty? That's a very good question. I don't think we have any sovereignty anymore, particularly Jamaica. I think that Jamaica lost its sovereignty during that 2010 Tivoli Gardens incursion, and we will never get it back. We will never get it back. And notice afterwards, the IMF went there and they really pillaged and plundered that economy, right? That's what happens. As it stands, only time will tell what direction that Canada will take toward Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. What has become more clear, however, is that the declining influence of the United States in the region has coincided with the increasingly militarization of Canadian-Caribbean relations, right? And nobody would think that the Canadians, right, as it were, are aggressors, right, that they practice militarism because Canada is not the reigning superpower, but they do. They do. And it's time for us to wake up. It is time for us to wake up, right? And this is coming from, what was this, Coop Media, NB Media Co-op. I think it's Co-op, not Coop, but Co-op. And it was written on August 12th, 2011. So these are articles that have been shouting and screaming the news, and we have not paid close attention. And if you don't pay attention to what happened 5 or 10 years ago, when things begin to unfold before eyes now, a lot of people can't make the connection. They're saying, what, why, why? Yeah, because you weren't paying attention. If you were paying attention, you would know that it's happening because it's connected to something that happened 5, 10 years ago, right? But you're so much caught up with your games, right? And who is winning the NBA and the, what you call the football thing again, that nonsense. That is what you're caught up with. Your minds are caught up with these simplistic nonsense that you're not able to discern what is happening in the world. Canadian military tests its new base in Jamaica, right? So that is what the article is saying, and it was written by Roger Annis. Several months after signing an agreement with the government of Jamaica for permanent use of its territory for military stagings, Canada is dispatching 3 helicopters and 65 Air Force personnel to the country. A CBC News report says the Jamaican government requested the intervention in the name of providing it with search and rescue capacity during the current hurricane season. So it's going to be about natural disasters and climate change. Because remember now that climate change is important and we've got to save our planet. And to save our planet, we have to militarize the entire world, right? We've got to militarize the entire world. Because as a result of that, then you will have democracy. Remember now that if we are militarized, then we are going to have what? Freedom and democracy. Very important that you understand that, because that is how freedom and democracy are maintained in any country, including the United States of America. What is happening? What is happening on our college campuses in the United States? Right? The militarization of academia. That is what it is all about. Over the past years, Jamaica has been increasing its military ties to Canada. The Canadian Forces has a long-standing relationship with the Jamaica Defense Force. In particular, members of the JDF have been trained recently by members of the Canadian Special Operations Regiment in hostage rescue. Canadian aviation instructors have also held courses for their Jamaican counterparts, right? So the two defense forces that from both countries have always been working together, right? Something we need to understand. And we hear that we see coming from Ottawa and Canadian military negotiating staging base in Jamaica, right? And this also was written in 2011, on October 25th, 2011. And this is Ottawa is negotiating an arrangement with Jamaica to allow the Canadian military to stage out of the Caribbean island in the event of trouble or even natural disasters in the regions. It's in the region, but don't know why they have regions. The two Commonwealth partners have been quietly developing closer ties, something that recently manifested itself with the deployment of 3 CH-146 Griffon helicopters to back up the Jamaican Defense Force. You know, you really wonder during the Tiber Gardens incursion, if it was that it was a testing ground for military operation in the Caribbean. I think it was, because everything leading up to the Tiber Gardens incursion did not make any sense. Nothing made sense. And that the US went there and killed some Black people, some poor Black people, poor hapless, as I've always said, Black people, right? Did not make any sense, because they were no threat to the Jamaican state. They were just there protesting, which they had a right to. Of course, sadly so, that the state had lost its power, right? And its responsibility to protect those people, to protect the citizens of Jamaica, including those poor, hapless ghetto people who were protesting against sending the drug kingpin to the United States. But it was their right to protest. It was their civil right to protest against what they saw as injustice to their benefactor, Christopher Luscombe, right? And nothing came of it. The lawyers in Jamaica, they had a, what you call it now, a kangaroo court, in which these legal scholars showed off how, skilled they were in their craft, right? And they went on display whilst the Jamaican people mourned the loss of lives, right? They mourned the loss of their loved ones and their families, right? Nothing became of it. Business as usual. And afterwards, we saw there's evidence now that the Canadian forces have been militarizing Jamaica and other parts of the region. We've got to really pay attention, keen, close attention to what is happening in the world. And we cannot rely on mainstream media to do that for us, because they're not going to do it. Because the Gleaner, whilst we should commend them for bringing that to the light, they should have had a series of articles in which the Jamaican population should have been enlightened, right? But no, instead they like to talk about dancehall and who's publishing what book on dancehall and Miss Hotty Hotty and the dancehall queen, right? That is what we're all about, because if you can just put culture to the people and they can be entertained and they can walk around like fools, and you can talk about gender and all of that stuff, then the people will be entertained. The people will be entertained. And from the university to the churches to just about every sphere of life, people in all countries, not only Jamaica, in all countries are being entertained. You go to church and people want entertainment too. They want to see some, the pastor has to give them lots of jokes and humor them. Wow, a wonderful sermon the pastor has preached. It's this constant laughing like highness. And then you blame Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, for laughing, because you're not different from Kamala. Laughing at nonsensical stuff, right? While not taking serious stuff seriously. You talk about everything. Oh, it's a conspiracy, it's a theory. It's conspiracy. He's a conspiracist. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Until the full reality hits you like a category 5 hurricane. And then I'm not sure you're going to wake up, because at that time, perhaps you will die, because that category 5 hurricane will kill you, right? Will kill you, will snuff out your life in a second, without question, right? So it's time for us to get our acts together. The agenda is set. And this is not a wonderful agenda. This is a sinister agenda. An agenda that, if we do not wake up, which I don't think the majority of the populace will ever wake up, because of entertainment, this everlasting entertainment that we've found ourselves in. We like it. And our leaders realize that we love to be entertained. And they know that we do not like to think for ourselves. They know we like to follow the group. So the group think, whatever is said at University of the West Indies, oh, that's what I'm going to follow. Because after all, they're the scholars. They are the scholars. And I have to be in that group of scholarship, right? It's not what you think as an independent mind, because God gives you an independent mind and he expects you to think and to think for yourself. Now, I'm not suggesting that people cannot compile information and you can look at it, but when you see the majority of people moving in the same direction, because if you look at history of the world, the majority of people have never been right. The majority of people have never been right, whether they're religious people or they are secular people or they are academic people, never been right. It's always the minority, the ones that you think are bizarre. What a strange group of people. They look so strange, they eat so strange, and they just don't know what they're doing, right? These are the people who you need to follow. These are the people who you need to follow and to whom you need to listen. But no, I have to listen to what my friends are saying to me, because they are educated and they sound like people who know what they're talking about, when they have not got a clue of what they are talking about. Now, the Gleaner, and I hope that you will make the connection I am not going to make it for you. I mean, I'm stuck. You need to put your things and get your act together, right? Get your acts together because, the things that are about to be unfolded, I don't know if any human pen will ever be able to describe some of the things that the devil and his minions have planned for us. And you have to know the real enemy is the devil. It's not the people whom you're seeing. So the Bible says we wrestle against not flesh and blood, right? You think that it is a people that are militarizing you. No, these are not the people that you're fighting against. You're fighting against some of the most powerful forces that your brains can ever think or imagine, right? So let's look at what the Gleaner is saying here in another piece written by this paper. It says here, Jamaica to host training for Joint CARICOM Canada Security Task Force. That was written on March 31, 2004. Well, we're making the connection, right? So these are the troops that will be sent to Haiti in the restoration of freedom and democracy and stability in Haiti. Jamaica, in partnership with Canada, will be hosting a joint contingency training exercise on the island from March 28th to April 26th. There will be a Jamaican-led joint training exercise with CARICOM partners with the Canadian Armed Forces, right? The exercise is expected to further enhance the preparations of the designated CARICOM nations' security forces for possible multinational security operations within the Caribbean region, right? So this is what it's all about. So we can see where the Canadians are training their Jamaican counterparts as they head to the island of Haiti, right? To further militarize the region, right? The aim is to provide support for the transitional government in the war-torn French-speaking country, which was proposed by the Working Group on Haiti, right? This is the world that we live in. This is the world that we live in, right? Where dark forces are lurking behind the scenes. And these dark forces are working laboriously because they're serious. You and I are the ones who are not serious. We're more serious about being entertained and about going to movies, right? And talking about what happened, who won the latest NBA and the football series, soccer, whatever games that we talk about, right? We are the ones who need to get our acts together, right? It's amazing how these guys have been able to control the brain, right? But it's nothing new because we learned from the scriptures that the devil, Lucifer, was able to control 1/3 of the angels in heaven. And these angels are powerful. They're intellectually solid beings. You and I have not even yet grasped, we have not yet had an understanding of what scholarship is, like these very exalted beings, right? But Lucifer was able to control their minds and to deceive them. And likewise, our governments, or leaders, or political leaders are deceiving us, right? And we are willfully, willfully being deceived. Because if you do your research, you will understand that this world is not normal, that this world is abnormal, is abnormal. And the things that we're seeing from day to day are things that should be captivating our attentions and should be asked, what is happening here? And reminds me again of the biblical story of what happened during the flood. The antediluvians, they watched the animals going into Noah's ark. And they wondered what was happening. How could animals, even animals which showed aggression, like the lions and the tigers and the bears, how could they be going into an ark with other, innocent creatures, more submissive creatures, more docile animals? And they went in unison, right? Animal after animal, birds, the creeping creatures, reptiles, right? Went into Noah's ark. How could that be? And they still did not take stock and say, you were right, Noah. Something is amiss here. Something on the grander scale is going to happen. They just were so proud. They were so proud that they could not have gone to Noah and said, we're sorry. You are right. A flood, even though we have never seen a flood before, because the antediluvians, it had not ever rained on this earth. And that's what they were, the main argument was with Noah. What are you talking about? It has never even drizzled. And you're talking about a flood. A flood was not in their vocabulary, by the way. For us now, a flood is a normal thing. But back in their times, the rain was not normal. And they derided for Noah. But at the end of the day, Noah stood his ground by faith in God, and he won. Right? He came out of that disastrous occurrence, right? That natural disaster, well, it was a natural disaster because God rained it upon them, right? God rained it upon them because that was his way to dispense judgment on a wicked and immoral people. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you would like, you'll share, and you will subscribe, and that you will also begin to do your research and to become a thinker, a critical thinker, so that you can liberate your minds and that you will be free. And because the Bible says that truth shall set you free. Have a pleasant day. Ciao.